Hallo liebe Freunde,
Hello, dear friends,
Ostertage gemeinsam
who we've
virtuell
celebrated these
verbringen. Das
Easter
heißt, jeder
days
an seinem
together in a
Fleckchen und doch irgendwie
virtual
zusammen.
way,
Freuen wir uns
everyone where
heute
he
mit
is,
euch hier
and
verbunden zu
nevertheless
sein
we are
und ein
connected.
wenig über
And we're
die
happy
Zeit
to be
zu
connected to
sprechen,
you
die der
today
Ostermontag jetzt
in order to
einläutet.
talk about this
Sprich,
time which will wait for us
was wir
after
erlebt
Easter
haben
Monday,
oder nicht
and
erlebt haben,
also
auch das, jedenfalls
to
das,
talk
was
about what
geschehen
we've
ist,
experienced or what we
für
haven't
uns zu
experienced,
verarbeiten, zu verdauen.
and
Und zu
to
sehen, was das mit uns und unserem Leben macht.
have a look what
Und
this
dafür
has
würden
made
wir uns
to
hier
us and
kurz
to our lives.
mit euch verbinden und zuschalten.
So we're connected
Ganz
with you
kurz zu
today.
uns, oder?
We're
Wer
going
wir
to
sind,
introduce ourselves
was
quickly.
machen wir?
Who are we? What are we
Willst du
doing?
Ja, sag du mal.
Would you like to start? Okay, I start.
Andreas und Nicky Habsburg.
Andreas and Nicky Habsburg. We've been married for 25 years. We have 6 children. We live in the Rheingau, that's close to Frankfurt.
Dazu, wir sind auch berufstätig.
We are both working in our areas.
Und genau, insofern
Seid auch Teil von der Gemeinschaft Emmannuel.
And we're also a member of the Emmanuel community for many years now.
und insofern haben wir auch da schon vieles
And
Buntes erlebt.
we've
in allen
experienced
Facetten,
a
in
lot of
Deutschland und
things
anderen Ländern.
in Germany
Und
and
genießen
other
das auch
countries
durchaus.
with the community,
Genau.
and we're happy
Noch
to be part of
mehr
it.
zu uns. Ich hoffe, wir schauen lustig
I
und
hope
fröhlich
we
aus. Wir
look
hatten
more or
gerade
less
eine kurze
happy
Nacht, eine
because we had a
Kinder-
very short
Krankenhaus
night.
musste und gerade
One of our
überlegt, dass eine
sons
Kinder in den Wagen
had been hospitalized,
Gehsteig gesetzt hat.
and
Aber
the other one
trotzdem, das ist das normale
had a
Leben.
little car accident.
Und,
But well, that's life.
ich muss
So
davon nicht ablenken lassen.
we won't be hindered by these little things. And yeah, often we plan things and finally it turns out to be differently. And it's particularly in this situation that we reflect on how can we nevertheless live the Easter joy. Exactly. So put it into practice.
Zunächst, was haben wir erlebt,
First of all,
Das
what
waren
have we
jetzt die letzten
experienced in these last
Tage.
3 days
in denen wir gehört haben,
when we heard
zunächst mal ganz einfach gehört haben, was
first quite
passiert,
simply
was,
what
das
had
wurde
happened?
angekündigt. Sehr schön von Eva und von anderen
Eva
erzählt
and
und
others
eingeführt und mit Predigten
talked
dann
to
auch
us in a very good way,
ja, Liturgien,
and also the liturgies that
an
we
denen wir
could
auch
celebrate
teilnehmen
and
konnten.
participate.
Auch bei uns hier zu Hause zum Beispiel haben wir
We
uns
as well
dazu
were
als
connected in the
Familie vor dem
liturgy.
Fernseher versammelt,
We gathered our family in front of the television in this small computer, and then we were watching the live stream. It's also new for us to participate at Mass in this way. And so what have we experienced? We posed ourselves this question: what did we live together? We spent some time together, and we could enter into this Paschal mystery, into this way that Jesus went for us, that he took us into the preparation of the Last Supper, that he wanted to spend this time with us during these days, and that on this journey he taught us a lot of things about himself, about his way that he went. And all of that was connected to our way that we are going with him, and that we want to go, that we should go with him, or that we are actually going. And this big, big, big invitation to be connected to Jesus in what he wants to give us. So first of all, it was this time together with him, and then the second big present is that he goes the way, he went the way of the passion through death for us. And the resurrection, when the Father saves him from death, and so this is really the big present for us, that
erlöst werden. Und dann ist immer
the
die Frage,
big
was
question
heißt
of
das
our
denn?
lives are solved in the
Von dem,
sense that
was
we
wir
are
erleben und hören,
redeemed.
dann tatsächlich auch sagen, wie ist das denn ganz persönlich für uns?
What we've heard,
Ich habe
the
vorher
question is how,
mit zwei Jungen, die
what
bei
has
uns
this to do with
auch
my
dabei
life?
sind,
Just
gesprochen
a
auf der
few minutes
Familie und
ago,
gefragt,
I talked to two of my
was ist
kids
für euch?
and asked
Was
them,
würde euch interessieren?
what would
Eine Antwort,
you be interested
die
in
ich
if
bekam,
you heard this
war,
talk? And
ja, dass
one
wir
answer they gave me
sprechen,
was,
aber nicht nur
well,
die
talk about it,
klaren,
but
frommen Sachen, die
don't
jeder von
just
uns
repeat
sagt.
all the pious phrases that everyone already knows.
Frage
So what we
war,
actually are doing at the moment.
ja, was ist mir
Sorry.
wichtig?
And the other
Als
question was,
Antwort, dass ich weiß,
the
dass
other
ich
answer was
mit Gott immer neu
that I
anfange.
know that I can
Egal, was ich
restart
getan habe,
again and again
egal, ob ich mich
with
richtig
God.
oder
No
falsch
matter
entschieden
what
habe,
I've done before, no matter which
mit Gott
bad
immer neu
decisions
anfangen.
I've
Das ist also nicht
taken, I can
Und
ever
anders
again
noch, was sagt,
begin anew with God.
Das ist wirklich auch die Botschaft eigentlich von diesem
And I think that's really the message
ganzen Tag oder auch von unserem Montag, dass
that
so nachgelesen die erste Textstelle
the first
von heute wird
reading of today's Mass,
da spricht der Petrus und
Peter
sagt,
is
dass
talking
er
about
unmöglich,
it was
dass er vom
not
Tod
possible that Jesus was hold by death. It's an interesting statement, I think. He says it to people who have heard what had happened. And what does this mean for us? That everything that is dead within us, that this is put into the resurrection of Jesus, that his light of Jesus comes into our wounds. Most of you who participate in this retreat, you are younger, but nevertheless, I know a lot of young people around me, and I know that every one of us, we have to carry our little, weight, and there are always some wounds, some, maybe you've been insulted yourself, or your parents have divorced, or whatever, but so we know that's not the final word. And it's not important that we walk through life in a perfect way and that I do everything correctly, but we can, with all that we are, with all that we've experienced, that we can enter into resurrection. It's really as Jesus appeared to his disciples, especially to Thomas in a week on White Sunday, and when he's showing his wounds to Thomas. So this is exactly against perfectionism. So we don't have to be perfect, we don't have to do everything right, but we know in the wounds of Jesus is our salvation, in these glorious wounds. And these glorious wounds show to us that as we are with our wounds, we can restart again and again. And this, it's more than a reset. It's not just a repetition, but it's a more. With everything that we encounter and that we've experienced makes us, coins our lives, and this is and becomes an important aspect of our life. For example, I've met a young person who've experienced something really, really difficult, and she told me that every time that she talks about it to other persons who've experienced something similar, that she can be so much more compassionate, and through this compassion she can create such a different relationship to this person she's talking to that otherwise she would not be able to do so. And so all the crosses in our lives and everything that takes place into our lives can become a real light for us, but also for other persons.
aus dem Konzept.
Oh, sorry, I disturbed your concept.
Genau. Ruhig weiter.
Okay, nevertheless, I continue. Oh, no, you continue.
Gut, dann mache ich einfach weiter.
Okay,
Und
I
zwar
continue.
das Evangelium aber vom heutigen
The
Tag,
Gospel of today,
vielleicht noch in der Messe sicherlich mitbekommen, ist
you'll
ja
hear it in
die
Mass.
Emmaus-Jünger.
It's about the disciples of
Und,
Emmaus.
das fand ich auch sehr interessant, dass
And I
ich
found it
gelesen habe.
very,
dass
very
Jesus,
interesting when I
mit
read
dem
this.
spricht und,
Jesus
das eigentlich wirklich
talks to
erleben
them.
will, wie sie ihm, sagen, ja, bist du der
Quite,
Einzige,
it's
der
quite
nicht weiß,
funny
was
when
passiert
the
ist?
disciples say, "Well, are you the only one who are not informed about what happened in Jerusalem?" Actually, Jesus is the only one who knows what really happened, and they want to part.
Lädt sich sozusagen
And
dagegen
Jesus
ein
invites
und
himself a
gibt
bit
ihnen
and
die Möglichkeit,
gives
zu
them
begegnen.
the opportunity to really encounter him.
Der uns so wesentlich erschien, auch
That's the second crucial point.
können wir
How can we,
das in unserem Leben mit hineinziehen,
in the midst of our
wenn es
lives,
eben um eine Begegnung geht. Es geht
encounter
nicht sozusagen um
Jesus?
eine Philosophie
That's a
des
crucial
Lebens
point.
oder
It's not
eine
about
Religion,
philosophy,
sondern
theory,
im Christentum geht es
but
eigentlich um eine
Christianity
Beziehung, dass wir eine
is a
Beziehung
relationship.
haben können.
It's about having a
Das ist
relationship
eigentlich
to God.
für viele erst
And
eine unglaubliche
And for
Erkenntnis.
many people, they are really stunned when they discover that.
Ohne je erfahren zu haben, dass man eine echte Beziehung mit Gott
So some people go through the life without ever having a real relationship to God. I can't understand how you can. So how can we create this relationship to God?
Sagen, was heißt das?
And what does it mean
Mit hineinnehmen.
to take this into our lives?
Während der Tage auch gehört,
During these days, we've heard how freeing,
wir
how liberating it is that it's not us who have to do this, but God who is acting and God
Gang nach Emmaus ist nicht
who's
etwas,
working in our lives. Also, this way going to Emmaus is not
die unterwegs waren,
the work of the disciples who are on the way, but it's
sich weiter um
God
sie kümmert.
who continues to look after them, to care about them. So it's Jesus who shows
Der wusste schon,
what
dass
who explains scriptures and
wir
it
oder
who explains
wir immer nur ein
about what
Bruchteil
it
dessen
is.
verstehen.
So he knows that we only know only are capable to understand a little part of
Es gibt
all
eine
the
Zeit,
message.
die er davor hatte,
And
in der Form als
that's absolutely okay for God, because
Lebender unter ihnen war. Und dann weiß er aber auch, dass sie seine Gegenwart ganz genauso weiter benötigen und auch die Erklärung.
he knows that we need
Das heißt, er hört nicht
that he's
auf,
present
sich weiter
and
mitzuteilen,
that we need
sogar,
explanations,
wenn
and
wir ihn gar nicht gefragt haben,
so
zu sagen, sondern in diskreter
God-
Form dabei zu sein. Das ist schön bei diesem Gang
God
nach Emmaus
continues to be
auch. Wir checken
present
es gar
and
nicht, dass er dabei
he explains
ist,
things.
weil er
And
nicht
also in
aufhört.
our
Er ist
lives,
bei ihnen.
God is always present, sometimes in a very, very discreet way, so that we might not even recognize him in our lives. And so we see Jesus who lets the disciples speak, and at first they don't recognize him. So the recognition of Jesus is the very last moment of today's gospel, when Jesus takes the bread and shares the bread, breaks the bread, and this is the moment when their eyes who were blind, that they can see and that they can recognize Jesus. So an experience, the breaking of the bread, was repeated, and in this repeated experience they recognized Jesus. So that means God can show himself in very different manners in our lives, but he's very faithful in what he is showing us and that he is showing us. When we look back, so this way Jesus joins them and he explains scripture. He explains why everything had to be like this and like that. And the disciples, they had thought that, well, the Jesus thing, that was a big failure because and on this way the disciple feel how their hearts go up and open up. So, if we apply this for us, Jesus explains the scripture, and this can become very concrete for us if you take our Bibles. So we can, maybe some of you already have the habit of reading in the Bible, but we can take the Bible and we can start reading. For example, in the Acts of the Apostles, we can read about how the disciples and the church, the young church, continued to live after the resurrection. But you could also take the Gospels and read in the Gospels. And I think it's also possible for us to have this experience that our heart is burning when we feel this closeness of God through the scriptures, for example. And secondly, the very moment, the crucial point when they recognize Jesus is in the Eucharist. I don't know about you, but for myself, I don't feel it every time that I go to Mass, that my blind eyes see and that my heart is burning and that I've got a big encounter with God. But nevertheless, I think it's very important that we know that this is reality, even if we don't feel it at every time. So sometimes I can be very distracted during Mass, for example, but then I experience that every time if sometimes we've got the impression it's a bit boring in church, but if we realize what we live there, that we are encountering the living God, it can never be boring. Sometimes I'm so distracted and that I'm not able to walk with Jesus. Not long time ago, I went to a Mass and the priest said, we are running all the time, and this 1 hour during Mass is an hour of peace and we can slow down a bit. But this is very difficult because very often we are running. And to change the pace during Mass is not so easy. When I was little, my father took us children for long walks in the car to look at the landscape and so on. And for me, it was so boring. But my today's life is so different because all the time something is happening and all the social media, WhatsApp and so on. But to understand, if I want to encounter God, if I want to understand Him, I have to create this room for Him where I can encounter Him. Because God is, He's not invading our lives. Sometimes this happens. We can be happy about it if it happens. But most of the time, God finds Himself in the silent wind that the Old Testament talks about, and not in the storm. Coming back to this question, what have we experienced during these days, and what is God doing for us now? The joy that He's doing so much for us is very often we can't feel emotionally this joy, but that's not the criteria to measure if it has happened or not, or if God saves me or not, because it's an objective fact that God saves each one of us without making a difference, and that's His only reason to be with us, to save us, to bring us close to Him. So what do I want to take from these days? We've talked about this reality of God, this reality of what He is doing, and this is becoming reality in my life. That there is a bridge to what I am, where I come from, where I want to go, my concepts of life, that God comes in all to these realities of my life, and that He's working in all the different areas of my life. And this takes a lifetime, because life continues. And indeed, we experience it all the time. We don't experience it all the time, but it takes place all the time. So when we all took part in this event, in this, even virtually, maybe each one might have had a different experience, so maybe you've also been lonely because you lived it alone at home. But the criteria is not if you felt it, but that it happened. And for me, the image was quite helpful. The thought that God, He is not far away on His cloud, but He is very close to us. And the difficulty I had much more, the experience that God was close, I had at many years ago in Medjugorje, so at a very specific place. And so this experience made me feel that, okay, God is close at this particular place where I experienced Him. But coming back into my own everyday life, it was much more difficult to feel this closeness of God in my life. So there were like two realities in my life, a close God in Medjugorje and a God far away in my everyday life. And it was quite difficult to bring these two realities together. So that's the question, how can these realities come together? So back then, I was motivated to look in my everyday life, how can this happen? to experience how can this, what I've experienced in Medjugorje, continue at home. So, where does this take place at home? What I've experienced there. And this is when I started to look for others who had a similar experience, and we joined up. And that was a first exchange with others about what I've experienced, and that was for me the experience I'm not alone anymore. So when I was in Medjugorje, we were a community, but then we went back in all different parts of the world, and I was alone, apart from one of my cousins who lived close to me. So when I started to find others who had a similar experience, and that helped me to bring this reality into everyday life. And also to talk about it with others. And maybe even things that we've talked about in this talk, for example, going to Mass, have a time of prayer, that can be lived together with others as well. So all of us, we are living in quite different conditions, where we live, what we are working, what's our family background, and so on. And our experience is that God always has a super plan for us, but sometimes it takes some time for this plan to develop, because God doesn't want to overwhelm us with his super plan, but slowly in our life it gets more and more realized. And sometimes it's quite different from what we have thought that the plan would be. Only in the retrospective we can see, oh yes, this was how it worked out and how it was perfect for me, because God planned it. But of course I can't see it beforehand. But the question is, what can help us to, and this is the point that we always remember, God is close, God is present. Okay, we try to sum it up. We can come to God as we are. We don't have to be perfect. We can come to God with all our wounds, and he's always present. Secondly, when we go this way with God, we need some concrete things, for example, joining up with others who are also on the way, so that we don't stay alone. Then we said that it's good to take some time to read in the Bible, that God might help us and explain the scripture for us. And therefore it's important to take the time for that. And often, even in moments when you think you don't have time at all, it's my experience that when you take some time for God, nevertheless, that this will be the time which is really fruitful. But it can help. It can help to set a really a fixed prayer time in your daily routine, really to take this time. And this prayer time is a very intense and intense time that you can feel also. So, for example, in time of adoration.
dass wir da einfach
It's
ganz ehrlich sind
not just
und die
being
Zeit zu danken auch nehmen.
empty for God,
Und ja, wie wir es
but
immer mit
it's
diesem
also a time
waren,
where you
dieser
can
klassische
read the
Aufbau.
Bible, where
Wie heißt es nochmal? Also was zu danken, erstmal, es war ein Tag.
you can start with a thanksgiving,
Bitten,
then you can also pray, intercede, you can ask for forgiveness.
Kleinigkeit, also da, wo man so nichts kann, wie sagt man, also da, wo man
Wo irgendwas nicht so gemacht hat, wie man eigentlich weiß, wie es gehört.
If you did something where you know that
Passieren lassen.
it would have been better in a different way,
Dass man weiß,
so
auch
that
die Dinge, die man
frees you
die
also,
guten und die schlechten,
liberates
Gott
you,
wieder zurück in die Hände legen.
that you can
So, dass es nicht bei
give
uns bleibt,
everything
sondern
back
bei ihm
into the
auch.
hands of God.
Das ist auch wieder die Frage, nicht? Wie gehe ich damit um? Was mache ich? Lege ich die Sachen wieder zurück in Gottes Hand? Und dadurch kann er stückweise mit uns arbeiten.
And
Es geht nicht darum,
if we
dass
give,
er sich
if we hand
sozusagen
everything over into God's hand,
stückweise macht,
He
sondern
can
dass
work
wir einfach
with
mehr
us, on
entdecken,
us,
mehr
and
Erfahrung, gewinnen auch mit dem
so
Leben an sich. Und,
we can go forward in our
dass wir
lives
froh
and
werden.
in our life
Froh
with
werden,
Him,
weil wir sehen,
and
dass wir nicht
we're becoming happy because
allein sind.
we see that we're not alone.
Der Weg, man denkt, also früher dachte ich zumindest als Junger, habe ich gesagt, okay, wenn das alles klar ist,
In former times I always
die
thought
Szene ist gesetzt, das Setting, ja, was wir gerade aufzählen,
that
dann muss es ja sozusagen immer weiter nach vorne gehen, quasi ein gerader Weg.
then it's
nach vorne.
that this faith journey is a straight way, always always going straight. And now looking backwards, I can say it's not only straightforward, because there are always some obstacles in life, so that it's not as straight as that. Depending on your life story, there are always things that don't happen as you've thought it should happen or it would happen. And these are moments when even then you can experience this help and presence of God in these moments, even if they're very uncomfortable, because you might be disappointed. But these moments, maybe I'm helpless in front of myself, but in these moments I can really accept the help of God. If everything runs smoothly all the time and I feel the power to help myself, I might have difficulties to accept God's help. Or I might not even find it necessary to accept God's help. Of course, God's help is always there in a quite discreet way, so that I don't consciously experience it. But in times of failures, I can experience God much more deeply, and it can really change our relationship to God to the better. I can experience that God is taking me seriously in what I'm experiencing. So not just say, okay, never mind, but that He's taking me seriously in my sufferings. Even for third persons outstanding, they're saying, well, don't take it so seriously, it's not so bad. After some time, it won't be as difficult, but God is taking me seriously in what I'm experiencing. And this is a crucial point, especially when we're in contact with other persons who don't know this comfort. One place that is quite important is where we can do something for others is charity. This can be for us a great source of happiness, and this is where we accept to live out charity. It does us good. It's good for us to do good to others. I've heard. So it's not only about encountering God in our little chamber, in our little room, but it's also about stepping out and thinking about where could others need me and need my help, especially in those days, in those present days. These present days, you can get very creative. For example, we've got this in Germany, Tafel. It's a service for poorer people who can't afford buy food. And of course, in these days, it's not possible anymore that a lot of poor people come to this Tafel, and so young people were creative and they delivered the food to the persons by bike. So this is also a way where you can encounter God. Now we are connected virtually. For me, it's nice because we are reflecting a lot about the systems we live in, and also the negative sides of what we live. For example, that we are wasting a lot of time on our mobile, on the social medias, and we are trying to find a good way to deal with what we are living every day. And the exciting thing is that these, for example, social media and so on, they bring the opportunity that we are connected, even if we live in so different places, and that they can help us now to tackle this feeling of loneliness. In our everyday, in our society, we live a quite big individualism that can lead to a lot of suffering. And when we use the media in a positive way, we can also help to tackle this loneliness. And for example, we could talk about and exchange about what we've heard and what we've experienced during these last days. For example, your experience that it's difficult for you to have a prayer time, you can write and you can exchange with others about it. You can get connected. You can connect yourself to others, and you can also pray together with others and share your ideas. Or, for example, how can you help others? What Nicky just said, it's good for us to do good for others, and it's necessary in our human being. Very often we are quite egoistic and we're thinking about where am I? But the worries about ourselves, they are very unnecessary, because in doing something good for another person, God is absolutely looking after us and is fulfilling us with all that we need. I like the Bible passage when St. Paul says, the Holy Spirit and I decided. So it can be a healthy form of egoism to do something good for others, because it's really important, it's crucial for us to live charity. So in the end, it's also a point that we wish other people that they can also experience God. So if you've experienced God and if you've experienced His presence in a new way during these days, and if it was like a curtain that had been opened, where you can see, wow, there's so much more behind this curtain. There's this unpronounceable love of God that wants the best for me, that wants everything for me. And if we've had this experience, that we might also have the desire for others to be able to experience that. So if we know that God exists and that He loves every single person and that His love is for everyone, if this is our joy, then telling about others is not like a mission and persuading them to anything, but sharing our joy. Our experience is when we walk out and talk about, when we meet God, when we meet others, there are so many people who are really looking for something and who are looking for God, but they hadn't known that He really exists. And so we want to encourage you to have the outing that you believe in God and that you are feel free to share it with others. So God has created us, and our greatest happiness is if we discover Him. And it's clear we are all humanity, we are all in one boat, and we're not better than the others, but it's such a privilege when we can encounter God. And just to give a short testimony of our life, we are also not better than any other married couple. We also have some arguments just a few minutes ago before we were about to register this talk for you. We had a little argument. So sorry, it's a really big mixture. It's a potpourri of some things that we wanted to tell you. And you are unique, and we hope that you can take a few things from the potpourri that we presented you. So we wish you a really big, a very blessed Easter time. It's only about to start now, because the Easter time goes until Pentecost. So have a blessed time. See you.